Multi-span surfaces don't tend to be used on the main exterior surfaces of a car. So here's an interior example of a simple gear stick. And I'm going to shade this up, and I want to apply the reflections down here. But to make this easier, I'll undock the shading panel and expand it. And then it's easier to find the reflections button. And we get a choice of what scene to reflect. So I can choose Hall, for example. But I'm going to stick with the abstract one, as this will help us see the sculpted shapes. And what I'll also do is switch to the accurate tessellator setting, as this will improve the quality of the shading. And I may change the tolerance later as well if I need to. There are a number of situations where you might be using multi-span surfaces. And the first example is this fillet surface here around the edge of the faceplate. And this clearly has many spans and a lot of CVs. But it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the surface. And you can see that the highlights look good. And don't be worried about these flat lines. It's just the tessellation tolerance which I can tighten and see the highlights more accurately. And the surface is okay because it's been created by the Alias Fillet tool, which uses mathematics to calculate a smooth surface. And as long as we don't try to hand sculpt any of the CVs, which we typically wouldn't for a fillet, it'll be fine, as you can see. The second situation is where we might want to quickly sculpt a shape to work out what we want from a design. So this gear lever surface has been made from a simple revolve. But turning on the CVs and freely sculpting means that I can start to explore and experiment with the shape, and use it as a creative tool to try out ideas for my design. And once you get fully fluent with the mouse constraints and the marking menus, this can be a very quick and intuitive way to sketch ideas in 3D. And then later, once I'd resolved my ideas, I'd typically start a second iteration where I'd build it more accurately from separate surfaces. So here you can see that I've just sketched out a variant of the simple revolved shape. Thirdly, if I want to simulate natural materials like fabrics or the leather on this gaiter, it's useful to have lots of CVs along the length of this simple skin surface. So I can increase the number of spans in the control panel, and then use Pick Hull to select alternate rows, and then move them to create the folds in the material. But if I want to make it more natural, I can start to randomly move some of the CVs to create a more irregular form. And as I won't be manufacturing from this surface, it's just there to help visualize my design. So it's fine that it has waves and wobbles in the surface. And then finally I have this small compartment here at the front, and I might want to design a raised finger area to allow it to be opened. But if I pick these two CVs and move them up, then the opening it creates is just too wide. I could increase the number of CVs by going up in degree. And then just picking one of the CVs should have much less effect. But in fact it's still too wide because it's a single span surface and each CV affects the whole span. So this is one of the few situations where I might choose to increase the spans instead, because the extra spans have the effect of locking down the rest of the surface as I move this CV. So I get a much smaller, tighter shape. But a surface always has two directions. So in this direction I've still got a single span, so the modification is along the whole length of the surface. So to limit that, I might choose to add a few more spans in this direction. And that then locks down the surface more and allows me to create a very small, local, sculpted shape, just to explore the finger grip design. Being confident in quick sculpting of CVs is a really useful concept modelling skill. So if that applies to your workflow, have a go at sculpting these gear lever surfaces. And take a look at the second golden rule for a few more examples of where multi-span surfaces can be used effectively for concept design.